We're at LTX 2019. Still, actually, by the time this goes up, it will be long over. But I'm joined now by Jay. And Jay, we were just talking with Paul off camera, and he said that I've stolen the video idea you guys had years ago.
You mean the super original idea of talking about water cooling?
Yes, that one.
That one, yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about some of the most basic, or most important, let's say, things that you need to know for water cooling. I called them rules. Jay corrected me.
I just stole a line from the Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Is that they're more guidelines than actual rules.
Before that, this video is brought to you by EVGA's new audio sound card, engineered by AudioNote. EVGA's CEO knows high-quality audio and has begun bringing sound cards back. The new audio sound card is capable of delivering hair-raising audio superior to onboard sound. The card includes a line in, headphone line out, and mic in, and a Sony Philips digital interface. New audio also leverages EVGA's PCB design experience, has upgradable op amps, and uses AKM premium components for its DAC and ADC. Learn more at the link in the description below.
I'll just let you ask and then I'll kind of answer.
Sure.
Because if I just start out of thin air, I'll go on for like an hour.
So first of all, JayzTwoCents on YouTube, if you want to see him go on for hours in all of his old videos about water cooling, let's say the knowledge level of someone here is, let's start with maybe you've done some research. You've watched videos, you've read articles, but you haven't actually assembled the system. Okay. So what are the things that you feel like are most commonly overlooked that need to be paid attention to with water cooling? We previously talked about like mixing metals and fittings, I think, was one of the topics.
I think even more detailed, it's the chassis that they're using. Is that water cooling friendly?
Yeah, right.
Because I mean, it was just not that long ago. Only within the last 5 years did cases really start becoming more water cooling friendly. Before that, you had to modify the cases just to accept the radiators and such.
Especially the larger radiators.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the most common overlooked thing is whether or not their case is going to comfortably fit the components.
Yeah. And then after that, you found a case that says it will support the components.
Okay.
And now what are you concerned about?
Probably the type of tubing that they want to go with.
Okay.
So I said this to a few people today that I met where they said, I want to do water cooling, but I don't know if I want to do rigid. And it's like somewhere along the lines, the translation got lost in that you had to do rigid tubing.
Okay.
And that's why we're starting to do a lot more soft tubing stuff, because I want people to remember, like, look, the tubing is nothing more than a conduit to get fluid from A to B and back to A again, right? So yeah, I think a lot of people have this misconception that they have to do rigid tubing with compression fittings and elbows and all that sort of stuff.
And all the extra work involved
and the simplest and easiest way to get started is just with regular barbs and compression, or barb and zip tie, however you want to, or clamp, and soft tubing. Because it's forgiving. You don't have to worry about everything being exact.
So is there do you have a specific type of barb or fitting or compression that you favor, or you just kind of use them all?
So I still am a huge fan of the Premature Revolver fittings.
Okay.
They still are fairly size specific, where there's some brands out now like Alpha Cool and EK where they've got kind of like a range of size that they'll fit because of the forgiveness of the O-ring internally, or they even have replacement O-rings so they could fit 12 or 13 mil or 13 mil, and now 14 mil is a thing.
Okay.
Where Premature is still fairly, like, it's a 13 mil or a 16 mil, and that's kind of it. But they have such good clamping force. The problem with rigid tubing, if we're talking about that type of cooling method, is the fact that all you're relying on is compression of an O-ring being squeezed against the outer wall to hold it in place. And so if you're kind of moving things around, or you just want over time some of that pressure that does build up as the temp increases, you don't want it to pop off. You want a nice compression fitting that it's just got a lot of clamping force.
Right.
And to me personally, the Revolver is still the best in that area.
So you like it for the clamping force?
The clamping force entirely. But they're a little bit big. So sometimes they can interfere with like a backplate on a GPU, or because the collar's so thick, it could hit on neighboring components depending on how much room you have.
Right. Other than, so we've got some clamping force discussion. We talked about fitment, which is pretty basic. How about the type of coolant? That's probably a good one to talk about. That's probably, because I think people look at, I don't do these types of builds, but you and Paul and Kyle, you all make really good looking PCs.
Yeah, and those are definitely form before function.
Yeah.
Because anything that has an opaque look to it has some sort of a particle, or whether it be nanofluid or whatever other means of gaining that opaque style, has weight to it. weight that can eventually fall out, or when the pH balance starts to change, it can pick up ions and stuff and start to become heavier. And so you start to see it settle in the bottom of pumps and radiators and blocks and stuff.
Right.
And what's happened, and I've done videos about this in the past, where my complaint is more companies were concerned with bringing a product to market than doing true product testing on it
well, that's
in labs.
Industry-wide problem.
Yes, because I mean, a lot of these companies, like the first water cooling brand that I ever did anything with before YouTube that I did some forum posts about was Fluid XP, and they were one of the first, like, it's clear, but it's UV, so it UV reacted, which made it look like it was opaque when you hit it with UV light. But it was also the first, like, non-conductive coolant, which was exciting because it's like, hey, I won't kill my system. Then of course you find out it becomes conductive over time. Anything touching metals does pick up conductivity and ions and such. But when it comes to that type of fluid, it didn't fall out and stuff because they were using just distilled water with some anti growth inhibitors
Biocide or something.
Yeah, well, it was all premixed, and it was one of the first premix out there. But the thing is, so many companies now it's like the Best Buy TV effect. You walk in and all the TVs are set to dynamic mode because you have to stand out.
With the contrast at 100.
Yes, and the fluids are the same thing. And so I'm really just started going back to using distilled water with like 2 or 3 drops of biocide and calling it a day. And if you want to add some friendly dye to get some color, opaques are great, but I'm starting to just have to stay away from it.
So is there any type of dye that you feel comfortable for long-term use?
I've still had the best results with the Mayhem's dyes.
Okay.
Some of the other brands, we've noticed that there's still some clumping happening, even with just distilled water, which tells us there might still be a chemical issue with the dye itself. So now it's like those opaques, is it the nanofluids or the nanoparticles that's a problem, or is it the dyes? We
had an issue with an old thermal take one that they had sent. I think it was just like a blue coolant. And it was a giant bottle. We didn't use it all, but you could see in the bottle and also in the blocks, it just turns into like a sediment, like you would find in the bottom of a creek or something. Yeah.
So it's funny because when I had to clean out, my personal build, Skunkworks build, when the view like all built up in there, which had like a pearlescent. I don't remember exactly how they were gaining that effect. It was different than Aurora, which was like a vegetable oil extract.
Okay.
Where it got, and anything that's like food based is already a bad thing, right? It gives like bacteria something to grow onto, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens here is it turns into like a cottage cheese like level of. It's so gross. When I took the blocks apart and started toothbrushing it and like getting it clean and all the microchannels.
Did you do a video on that one? On like how to clean or something?
Yeah. I found that the best cleaning product that I use still for cleaning blocks.
Crest 3D White.
Crest 3D White. It's those crystals, man.
Hashtag not sponsored.
It even gets rid of the tarnished look. It gets back. The nickel plating comes back to a shiny nickel.
And just a toothbrush, right?
Just a regular toothbrush, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, I found that by accident doing that. I'd never seen a suggestion. I just was like, I wonder, because a life hack is always like clean it with toothpaste, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, this one's got granules in it. I'm wondering.
You definitely should approach them for a sponsorship.
I'm telling you, it's like it's totally life hack status.
Yeah, it is. Any other major tips from you on getting a loop picked out correctly the first time, or even just assembling it? Tube routing, is that one worth discussing?
So it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that your reservoir feeds your pump, or at least you have to prime it first that way, and then you can reorient it however you want.
Oh yeah, that is worth mentioning too, is making sure you don't run your pump dry
when
you first set it up.
All of these are lubricated by a fluid layer between like the impeller shaft and then the housing itself. So it relies on fluid filling that void, otherwise it will rub the edges.
Yeah.
Because they just spin on like a ceramic bearing and then magnets, right?
And you'll hear it whine too.
Yeah, what you're hearing is the metal on metal scraping, and it's pretty bad. But yeah, so as long as you if you get the pump primed, the order at which the parts have very little effect on temperature, if any at all. It's usually extremely negligible. We're talking 1 to 2 C. And the thing people forget is the radiator, it's not like a car where you're dealing with extreme delta temperatures between ambient and then the actual heat source.
There's one instance, so we were able to create an instance where loop order starts to matter, and it's a 3175X overclocked.
Okay.
And
so we're already talking like almost 1,000 watts right there.
And it's 2 Titan RTXs overclocked. And so what happens is, in that instance, it matters only because Pascal, Turing, the newer architectures are so thermal dependent.
Right.
if you do get like a 1 to, let's say more reasonably, maybe a 3 to 5 degree difference, you might be talking like a loss of 12 megahertz on the clock or something.
Yeah, you're talking like,
So,
one step, right?
It matters, but
yeah, but
that's
an
absurd scenario though.
But if you go to a more reasonable CPU, it probably wouldn't make a difference at all.
I sincerely doubt it.
Yeah.
Thermals, so thermals for sure matter, but loop order, different story. Loop order would only matter.
It would have to be picking up so much heat that it's because it's touching the block for such a short period of time, right? It has a very small opportunity to pick up heat, so it has constant flow, obviously. But the radiator, is obviously responsible for the total the loop cooling capacity. And so unlike a car, which has a thermostat that blocks off flow and reaches certain temps before it'll start flowing, and it's constantly starting and stopping, that's a constant flowing loop that's just going to equalize with whatever the cooling capacity of the block or the radiator is, or at least how much heat the blocks can absorb.
Right.
Because people forget too, like water cooling, it's not going to give you these crazy amazing temperatures. The best you could ever achieve is ambient.
Of course, yeah, you can't go below ambient.
And then even then, you're never going to reach ambient because there is some efficiency loss between the contact of the block and then the thing is touching.
Yeah.
So usually, I think the best I've ever seen by doing I think the 480 rads I did with the box fan was like 5C above ambient.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And that was a pretty extreme situation there where you would never practically do that. But it just go to show that there is a diminishing return on how big you can size your loop.
Yes, definitely. So if you want more discussion like this from Jay, Jay's 2 cents will be the channel. I'm sure everyone knows at this point.
And we definitely owe the audience an upgraded water cooling guide because mine's now 6 years old.
Okay.
So it's definitely
some
time
things have changed.
Not so much, but I think what's changed is there's a lot more options.
I'm sure your studio quality is a big difference.
I was gonna use the term that we're gonna modernize the guide.
Right.
Yeah. So some of the options have changed. Rigid tubing wasn't as much of a thing then as it is now. So there's things to talk about.
So subscribe to Jay to make sure you can catch that, and we'll share it once it's up. Thank you for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you all next time.